Welcome to Unit 9 of Piano Video Lessons. I'm Lisa, and in this unit we're studying Grade 1 level Baroque music. This is Unit 2 of Year 2. Today we'll be working on Minuet in A minor by Johann Krieger. In this lesson, I'll be introducing the piece and we'll be covering the basics of rhythm, notes, and fingering. This is video number 1 of 3. You can also get a complete index of the lessons and the ebooks at pianovideolessons.com. Just click the info card. You can find the sheet music on page 3 of your ebook. The practice plan is in the appendix. We also have a practice sheet or a study guide for the minuet, as well as a sheet on the characteristics of Baroque music. I'll be covering just about everything from those sheets in today's lesson. So today we're working on accurate fingering, accurate notes, and accurate rhythm at a slow tempo. Before we get into that, let's just have a look at this piece and the overall piece. The first thing we notice is that it is in 3/4 time. So we're going to be feeling a 1, 2, 3 pulse. So a minuet is a dance. This is a piece of music that can be danced to. It's a very elegant, proper dance from the Baroque era, and it's actually one of the few dance forms that made it through into the classical era. It's very popular. And we see that it's written in 2 sections. So this first section ends here in the middle of line 2. It's got a backward repeat. And then another section begins. You see the forward repeat. And here's the end of the piece taking us back through. So we say that this piece is in binary form because the A section is at the beginning and the B section is at the second half. We can call this a piece rounded binary because we'll see a return of the music from the A section at the end of the B section. So we call that rounded binary. Now the piece is also in the key of A minor, and it's a really good idea to practice the technical requirements of A minor along with this piece. So you can go back to Unit 8 or just click the info card for the lesson for the minor scales for A minor and also the minor triads for A minor because they're going to be used in this piece. So let's have a look then at the piece. On the list here, I've written these sort of in the order that they make the most sense to learn. So we have fingering, notes, and then rhythm. So, these first 2, I guess you could do them in either order, but let's have a look at the fingering first. And we're just looking at the A section. So the A section here is the first 8 measures. I'll put an A up here, and then the B section starts down here, so I'll mark that with a B. Looking at the A section, we can look at the fingering. And the first 4 fingerings are marked in, actually the first 5. So let's just practice those here on the tabletop or the piano keyboard lid, whatever you have available. But the fingerings are gonna go 4, 2, 1, 5, and then 4, and it looks the same, skip, skip, 5. So it's gonna be 4, 2, 1, 5 again. Next here we have 3, and then a skip, so it's going to take us up to 5, and then down, 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 5, and we're in the top space here, so this is from 5, we're going to then go down to a neighbor, 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 repeat. Left hand is going to do the same thing. We're just going to go through fingerings. We're going to have 1 and a skip, so that's going to have 1 and 5. Then we're going to move down to 4. And you see it coming up by neighbors, so 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to move our 4 and come up 3, 2, 1. Then we're going to play 4 again, 3. Now we have to move our 1 in and then play 3 next. Then we have 2, 1. Now here's an octave, and I know that when I play an octave, I'm going to go from 1 to 5 and finishing with finger 2. So practice going through that fingering just on a closed lid until you are prepared to play the next finger when it's that finger's turn. And the next thing we'll do is look at the notes. So I like to do something called note flashes, or note flashes. But basically what you do is you look at every single note that has a finger number written with it, and you practice that by playing it alone on the piano. So we can start here with finger 4 and play it on this note, which is E. Then there's finger 2 on C, finger 1 on A. Then we move up to finger 5 on F. And here's a 4 on D. So I'm moving my hand now. And then here's a 5 on E, does not require a move. Here's the 3 on A. That one does require a move. So something that you can do, if you like, is make a circle around any of the places where you had to move your hand. So we did have to move to the 4, and we also had to move to the 3. That will just zone you in when you're practicing to make sure that you've got these on the right notes. So 3. Now here we're going to have 2 on the G sharp, and a 1 is a reach, and then a 5. So you might just circle all of those just to be a little bit careful about the placement for those fingers. And that's the end of the finger numbers here for the A section for right hand. So let's go back and look at the left hand. Here it says 1, and that will be for the top note. And I'll play that with a 1 and a 3. Next it's a 4 all the way down to D. So I'm going to circle that because I had to move. Then 4 on C. Again, I had to move. Here's 1 on F, no movement required. 1 moving to the note E. And then 3, didn't have to move. 2 on D, 1 on E. Here's an octave. You could just write a 5 right in there and circle it, and then finish on a 2. Once you've moved down to that 5, you don't have to move to get to finger 2. So we have achieved then learning the fingering, and we're starting here on the accurate notes. So the first stage of this might be note flashes. I'm going to call those note flashes. The next thing we're going to do is play all the notes, but we're not going to worry too much about the rhythm because that's the third thing on the list. So here we're going to go starting off with E, skip, skip, up to F. Notice I'm not saying every note name. D, skip, skip, up to E. I'm thinking more about the relative distances. 3 on A, skip, neighbor, neighbor, neighbor on a black key, down to E, up to E, and then neighbor, 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 repeat. So the more important notes to know specifically which letter you're playing are the ones that involve these circled fingers, which are the jumps to a new position. Everything else is played relative to the position of the hand. If you're not familiar with reading intervallically, I'll just put a link here in the description, in the info card, and you can go into a video that is in, I believe it's in Unit 3, where we're talking about fingering out fingerings based on intervals. This is way back from Year 1, Unit 3. Now let's go ahead and play the left hand. We're going to play all the notes. So we're going to play 1 on C with a skip. Then we're going to move down to D, D, neighbor, neighbor, G. Then we're going to go down to C, and then neighbor, neighbor, neighbor. Skip down that 4th to C again, neighbor. Bring your thumb in, hold. Then we're going to have a skip. Then we have neighbor, neighbor, octave down, and then finishing 2 on A. So those are all of the notes. You want to practice that until you can easily move between all of those notes. You don't yet have to worry about the counting. You just have to make sure that you're using the right fingers on the right notes. That's the A section. So I made this check mark. I guess that's for the A section. I'll just draw a little line down the middle. And so we've worked on the notes then for the A section of the minuet. And now we can start to work on the rhythm. And one of the challenges of this piece is working the rhythms with both hands together. So we already did discuss that it's in 3/4 time, which means we're going to count 3 quarter notes in each measure. So that means we have to count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 in each of these measures. And these first few are not terribly complicated, but when we get to this one here, it might pose a little problem. So let's just zone in on this measure right here. This is measure number 5, and we're just going to focus on the rhythm in this measure for a moment. You can see that both hands are going to play on beat 1, and then it's going to play 2 and, so it's going to go left, right, and then it's going to go both right. So it'll be 1 and 2 and 3 and. So we have both, left, right, both right. And I was saying that the word and in between here because this is helping me divide my beats in half. When I'm playing a quarter note, it's going to hold for 1 beat. But when I'm playing an 8th note, those pairs of 8th notes get 1 beat. So if I say 1 and, I'll give a place and time to play that second 8th note. And here we have a dotted quarter note, which adds half of the value of the quarter note. So the dotted quarter is 1.5 beats. So we're going to start the second beat while still holding this quarter note. And we won't play this 8th note, which is all by itself. So an 8th note alone, I hope you can see this and it's not off the top of the page. is a half of a beat. So 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and. So that's why they line up the way they do. A similar rhythm happens down here in measure number 7. So let's have a look at that one in isolation and just work out the rhythmic counting for this measure. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3. The left hand has 3 quarter notes, and we can line that up nicely. We notice the right hand has an 8th note on the first beat, so we have 1 and. Here then we have 2. We might as well put the and to make sure that we're not rushing. And then we have 3 and. So we're going to hold this dotted quarter for 2 and 3, and we're going to play this last 8th note on and. So that looks like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and. So it's both, it's both right, both left, right. Counting 1 and 2 and 3 and. So you could go through this whole section now, counting to 3 and tapping and counting the beats. So I'll do that. Hopefully this isn't too wiggly. It's a little bit wiggly on here, but maybe it's not too distracting. Here we go. I'm going to count to 3 with ands, and I'm going to tap hands together the first 8 measures. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2. Here's the tricky one. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So that is the rhythm. We understand it. Now we have to apply it to our piece. So we're going to go ahead and play very slowly and count this rhythm. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and. So if you had to stop anywhere to think, that's okay. You're allowed to take little breaks in your playing. Might go something like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. So basically what I'm doing there is I'm just stopping at the bar line to think a little bit. At this stage, it's okay if our beat is not steady. We can stop and think when necessary and even spend extra time on any tricky parts. Okay, so that was the accurate rhythm at slow tempo for the A section. So now let's go through the B section. But before we do, let's just label where the A section comes back in, which is going to be right here. So in effect, we've already learned the last 8 measures of this piece. So now we're just going to focus our attention on the middle 8 measures, beginning here. And we're going to go through the same process that we did before. So beginning with the right hand, let's just work out the fingering. It starts with 3, up, up, 1, and then 3, up, up, 1. Now we're down here. 2, up, up, down, skip, up to 5, down, 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 2, 1, 2. It's like it kind of made us switch to a different finger on the same note. Sometimes that happens in music. Helps you get a heavier beat on the second one or a nice lift between 2 notes. Let's go back and look at the left hand. It's going to start on 1 and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we have 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 1, 5, 2, up, down, down, down. Now we can go back and do the note flashes. So looking here, it's got a 3, and the 3 is on C, and then a 1 on A. We did not have to move. Then we have 3 on B, and we did have to move, and then 1. So let's go ahead and circle that 3. 1 was on G, that did not involve moving. Now we have 2 on A, no movement required. Now we have 5 up here on G, so we're going to circle the 5 because we had to move. And then we had from G, the next note is C with 1, and that did not involve moving. And then here it moves your 2 onto the same note. And I'll tell you now why that happens. It's to help you prepare for this next section, which begins on finger 4, and you can move to a different finger on the same note without thinking too hard, because you don't have to go anywhere, you just have to switch fingers. But you might need to practice that. All right, so we've worked through the right hand fingering flashes, note flashes, and now we're going to do the left hand note flashes. So here we have 1 on A, then we have 1 on G. We're going to circle that because we had to move. Now we have 3 on F, also involves moving your hand. 1 on G, hand position, move. 2 on C, we're going to circle that one. And that's the end of the B section. All right, so we've got the note flashes. Now we can go through and play the correct notes. So beginning here with 3 on C, we're going to play C, up, up, finger 1. That was a distance of a 5th. Moving 3 to B, up, up, down a 5th to finger 1. Now 2 on A, up, then down, and a skip to 1. Now move 5 up to G, and then neighbor down, and finger 1 on C, switch to 2. Okay, so those are the accurate notes for the right hand. Now we're going to look at the left hand. We're going to have 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we'll put our 1 on G, and then we're going to go down, 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 down. These are all neighbors. Moving our 3 to F, moving up by neighbors, and then down from space to line to space. Those are neighbors. Up a neighbor, bring your thumb into G, reach down the octave. Again, you might want to put a 5 and circle it there because that's a big reach. And then we have 2 on C, and then up, down, down, down. All right, so we've worked out the notes for the left hand, and you notice that I didn't say every note name. Mostly I focused on being accurate on the first note of a grouping and then reading it by interval distance, up or down, neighbor or skip, octave, or in this case a 4th. So those are things we have reviewed before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but I do want to make a note that that is something that you need to focus on. So now we can do the rhythms for this section. Let's look and see where the complicated ones are. In these first few measures, we just have quarter notes against dotted half notes, so we don't have anything complicated to count in through here. This measure has this dotted rhythm, and it's got 1, 2, 3 beats, and the left hand just tucking in here on the half beat for that F. Here's another more complicated measure, 1, 2, 3. So here we're going to have 1 and, we play on 2, and here we have 3 and. Now we're going to say the and in here. We're just not going to write it in so that you can see that it's going to sound like 1 and 2, 3 and. Here's the last one, 1, 2, 3. And the and is going to sneak right in here because this dotted quarter is going to hold for 1 and 2. And then here we have 3 and. We're actually not going to play anything on 2, so I'm just going to erase it because it's going to sound like 1 and 2 and 3 and in that measure. So here we've written in the complicated measures and they're back to back to back. So let's go ahead and just work those out before we try to play it. So I'm just going to mark those off, the little bracket here, so we can see what we're focusing on. And it's going to go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So that's both hands together tapping while counting. You want to review that until you can do it just with the tapping, because playing it on the keys with the correct notes and fingers is more challenging than getting it right with tapping. Let's zone in on this section at the very beginning of our practice, and since there are no finger numbers written in here, let's go ahead and write them in. Looking at this note here, we see it's a line above this one, so we're going to be playing the finger number 3 to start this on B, and here we can see this is also the note above this one, so we're going to be playing finger number 2 starting on G. So here we have 2 on G and 3 on B, so very slowly, here's how it's going to go. 1 and 2 and 3 and, you might want to practice that a little bit. There's a big octave reach in there. 1 and 2 and 3 and if you're ready, try the next part. 1 and, bring your thumb in, 2 and reach, 3 and the next measure, 1 and 2 and 3 and. So I was stopping and going, but I was counting and playing the notes lined up with the beats that I was trying to play them on. So I'll do that again. Maybe I'll stop a little bit less this time. It's important to think when necessary. 1 and 2 and reach and, now nobody's moving, so I'm going to play a 3 here and a 4 here. 1 and squish and reach and 1 and 2 and 3 and. All right, so we've got that layered in, but we're going to do it again because we want to be able to do it without thinking of anything. So I'm not going to give you any cues this time. I'm just going to count. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. All right, so we've counted it slowly and I've done it through there without any stopping. So let's go ahead and try to play the entire B section with accurate fingering, accurate notes, and steady-ish counting, but accurate counting nonetheless. Here we go, starting at the beginning of the B section. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and. So this finger number 2 is circled, and if you wish to uncircle it now that we've written a 5 and circled it for this octave, you may do so. Only because if the circles are triggering you to look for a shift, it might cause some confusion because we're no longer shifting here. We thought we might be when we read this section, just doing the flashes. But once we included the shift is actually on the previous note here on the octave down to G. So there are other things you can do to help yourself with distances. You can do things like draw a big arrow down for an octave just to cue yourself that that's going to happen. There's one here in the right hand in the A section. You could mark that in both places or you could just mark it in one place. But now we've worked out the notes, the fingering, and the rhythm for all of the A and B section. That is the end of stage 1. So you can use this section here to make any notes you want to about this practice. You could set yourself a start date, which is today, and give yourself a goal for when you're going to finish it. And you can either write in the date that you finished it or just check it off the way I have done here today. And this little spot up here is where you will mark the name of the piece that you're working on. So that is the end of this lesson. Our next lesson, we're going to be moving on to stage 2, where we're going to be working on improving the way we play the piece. We're going to keep our tempo steady. We're going to add things like dynamics and articulation into the piece to give it a true minuet feel. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in our next lesson. So come on back for part 2.